Britain we are free. Free to think and say what we like, free to go where we want, free to choose whatever we want to see and experience. Censorship is a thing of the past. Or is it? The name's been changed to the British Board of Film Classification, but they don't just classify films as suitable for children, adolescents or grown-ups. They also cut bits out, from erect penises to certain weapons. And some films they won't let anyone see at all. The people who make these decisions aren't elected, they aren't accountable to the public, and are contractually bound to keep quiet about their deliberations. The only person they're answerable to is the director of the board, and he can sack them all if he wants. That's just what he did last year. Sacked the lot and got a new board of full-time censors. 4 of the censors who were victims of that bloodbath have now broken their vow of silence to reveal how censorship works. They give us an insight into how they view violence on film.
There's tremendous ignorance about what the very symbols we use actually stand for, what they represent. I don't think 1 out of 10 parents know what PG stands for, as opposed to U, for example. And judging by the way we made decisions, I'm not sure I do either sometimes.
I didn't see it as censorship. If I had, I wouldn't have taken the job. I see it as deciding what is an appropriate age for certain material to be available.
All right. Maybe it ain't Esteban.
I always thought it was a paradox that one end of the week as a psychotherapist I was encouraging freedom of speech, and at the other end of the week as a censor I was actively stopping it.
You can kill me all you want, but I love you no more!
So you gonna be the man, Jake?
Some people say film just reflects what's in society anyway. That's just what film does. It reflects the way society is. But I think it's got to be more complicated than that.
Oh, no.
Oh, goodness.
Maggie did float the option that there might be a possible 15 here. I don't know if anybody was...
Oh, I certainly think it's 15, 18, borderline.
We have a child hero who's responsible for organising several murders, who's also responsible for passing around both smack and crack cocaine and all sorts of
Which
stuff.
he doesn't take himself.
It doesn't matter whether he doesn't take himself, he's still dealing with it.
You can't rate him on the specific
Well,
visual.
I think language is
I don't think there's a single visual.
No.
But I think language is one of the issues
Yes,
here.
language.
I mean, there's a clear...
in the hood at 15.
I think it would be a pity to get lost for the details, though one obvious detail is propositioning a schoolboy of 14 and
real
asking, you know,
Which
whether
is fairly early
he
on.
wants sex with her
Real
and
too,
so on.
Suck,
Seems
stick,
to me.
good,
I think it's the fact that it is fantasy that worries me in terms of 15 rather than 18.
There's a point about this world in which he grows up that is both corrupt and corrupting, and he's in the position of having been corrupted by it.
But it's only Blyton of the 90s for the black ghettos, isn't that what this is? And part of the problem about Blyton was that she was so ambiguous.
Why are we fiddle-faddling around, cutting frames and lines of dialogue out of films which are always going to be offensive to some people, no matter how much you cut out of them?
Absolutely, but what was it that seized you with campaigning zeal to
the
protect
illogicality,
these?
I think, more than anything. The fact that what's acceptable today as far as censorship is concerned may not be acceptable tomorrow. What is acceptable in one medium may not be in another. And most offensively of all, that what is suitable for you as an ex-censor to watch, and me as a critic, and these people as filmmakers, this may not be suitable for the so-called ordinary man in the street. I think that's the kind of ammunition that ought to destroy censorship.
Perhaps I should explain that for nearly 20 years I was a censor at the British Board of Film and Video Classification. And that meant I was one of the people that actually put the classifications on films, or cut them so you couldn't see the gory bits or whatever. And in a way, I think what we've done today is to bring a film that presented quite a lot of problems for us, and was one I thought you probably wouldn't have seen.
What are you doing here? Let me tell you something. I want you to listen to me, okay? This is not your country.
In a sense, you're doing today what we had to do all the time, which was to see a film cold, or a video, and then say what we thought about it, and whether we thought there were issues it raised that we'd be worried about other people seeing, and just what the issues were, really, and what we felt about them.
Watching that reminded me of Clockwork Orange, like a cheaper version of Clockwork Orange, but the same sort of thing with a little tribe and the classical music and the violence going on. Well, that's what that film was saying as well, like we're skinheads and we're Nazis and we hate Asians, niggers or whatever.
I think it comes to censoring, you have to be careful with gang welfare. That's where I think the censoring should be done somewhere in the line there. Because it's okay saying now if skinheads with Asians or Chinese or whatever. Yeah. I mean, if we had a Chinese person in here, it'd be a different kettle of fish. Because he may not like it, then you get his point of view. It could be skinheads against blacks.
If you're poor or whatever, you know, if you come from a rough background, if you're violent, then you're going to be respected by other people and get what you want that way. Instead of like going you know, through education or whatever and doing it that way. If you're a violent person and you're feared, then you're going to get what you want. And that's always shown on films as well, you know, like the violent person's always got the big house and the big car and the nice woman and, you know, and he's going around chopping people's fingers off and for not paying money and stuff, so.
Violence is only one very small part of a very big picture. Social deprivation in the country just now. The breakdown of communities, the breakdown of family life itself, the missing male, the male role model in the family. Now, these are all contributory factors, and I think violence on the screen is only one small part.
So when did you first encounter violence?
I grew up with violence all my life. I mean, I grew up in the back streets of Glasgow in quite a violent neighbourhood called Postle Park, and it was a particularly violent area. And I mean, I probably saw my first killing when I was 10 years old, and quite a violent one at that.
Even when I was young, it was like, I used to hang around with quite a lot of gangs that just smash bottles and just hit people with them, you know what I mean? But to me that was fun, you know what I mean? I was young and it was part of life really, you know what I mean? But watching films like that, I wouldn't actually go out afterwards and start making it real, you know what I mean? I quite enjoy films like that.
If the parents don't look after their children and what their children are looking at, then it's the parents who must be held up there. It's not the actual violence. And it's not enough for a parent to just say, no, you're not watching that, and that's it. Because normally, well, when I was a kid anyway, my mum said don't do it. Then I would wonder why don't do it, and I would probably go and do it. But my mum said, no, don't do it because, then I think that's got a lot to do with it, and I think parents have got a lot to do with censorship rather than the actual censors themselves.
Parents not mean only father and mother or first-degree relatives. The society is the parents of all the kids, and they are the responsible their future. The filmmakers, they are as well the parents of today's child, and they have to think before making a violent film. They made a film to showing a very realistic, a very effective. Who were they making this film? For the adult or for the child? Child can access to get anything from video show or any kind of violent film, anywhere.
I think that goes to the crux of censorship, doesn't it? It's the ones that can't distinguish between fantasy and reality that censorship poses a real problem for. Violence can sometimes desensitise people, and certain individuals it can disturb people, and it's usually ones that are unable to distinguish between the fantasy and reality that it disturbs.
I've seen a great deal of what a human body looks like when it's cut and burned and slashed and set on fire and had acid thrown on it and so on in adult films. Now, clearly, talking to you here now, you could take me around here and you could show me how that's done and I could be absolutely fascinated. Yeah. When I'm in the cinema watching that, what I'm relating to is what seems to me at that point to be a real human body, really lacerated, really cut in half, really chainsawed, really, and all the rest.
I'm actually glad that the news now is actually physically showing things like this happening in Bosnia. I really am. Because what we do artificially, you're seeing it for real. But then, look at it this way, if I'm doing it, for me now, I mean, I'm not going to do it just for the sheer fun of it. I actually want people to say, Jesus, is that really what happens? That's horrific.
Supposing they say,
that's
really exciting and lovely and delicious.
They are a very twisted person. That's all I can say. They're a very twisted person who had something wrong with their youth. We knew when we did the original Alien. I mean, I did that. I blew something out of John Hurt's chest, which, if people have seen it, it'll probably stay with them for the rest of their lives, this thing happening. It was all to be in one shot. That was the most difficult thing. So then it's a challenge. But that's part of it. In all honesty, the worst thing of all was actually making the T-shirt rip apart. How do you break down material that it will actually break when it wants to break? This little character here came 45 feet out of a castle battlement into a lake with Mel Gibson on his back. It wasn't Mel, obviously it was a stuntman, but they actually came out and into the lake. And you will never know that that's not a real horse. In a lot of these movies, you see people with cuts and scrapes on them, because this is what happened in battles. I mean, arms came off and everything else. So what I actually did, I wanted to take it further this time for more realism. So I actually made and stuck onto real live horses, nasty battle wounds, things like this which would carry an arrow, and an arrow will be sticking out of it, but the arrow itself will be made of cardboard tube. So if the horse did fall on it, nothing would hurt the horse. So we are very conscious of not hurting anything. And then we actually dress it. Now a kid of 5 years old can see that if they're keen in horses when a horse is hit barbed wire. And don't forget, we're not dwelling on it and saying, look how horrible it is. It's part of an overall picture.
He was driven to war.
I think you can go too far with violence, but I don't think that it's copping a bad rap, I think. A lot of it. There was no one more violent than Shakespeare. And some of those Jacobean tragedies are just, they are really, you know, whoa.
Dead for a ducat! Dead!
I don't know whether they scarred people's minds back then. I think they were already weird.
No, not. Is it the king?
And they will love to get hold of videotapes and they will run it backwards and forwards and run it backwards and forwards and look at the frame counts and really try. And that's what they do to us. I mean, children do it as well. I mean, I know children do. And they try and work out how it's done. And I mean, the public now are so educated on what we do. If it's in a film, they know it's artificial. They know it's not reality.
First, I'm going to use you as a human shield. Then I'm going to kill this guard over there with the Patterson trocar on the table. And then I was thinking about breaking your neck.
And what makes you think you can do all that?
You know my handcuffs? I picked them.
What's this with them? Whoa! It can't get him up.
I do think that children do need a variety of expressions, sadness, violence, etc., etc. It does exist, violence. They do have to deal with these issues. It's a question of what degree, but I don't think you can eliminate it completely.
So I suppose we should address the general question to begin with about whether there is a problem to be addressed at all.
I believe that children should know there is violence, but on the condition that the back of their mind they should always understand that violence is the last resource and should always be avoided.
Surely it's a detestable and frightening thing and not something that should be glorified and made into entertainment. It's not something which celebrates life at all. And you can still treat the problem of violence in films. They can be about violence, but I don't think you have to portray it. People can talk about it, can be there in the background. But I think once you show it on screen, it changes the whole nature of the film.
When it's actually showing something about, for instance, what happened to the Red Indians in America, what happened to the Jews in Germany, you know, any of these things, it's actually quite important then to be able to show what does happen under certain situations. Then there's a reason.
I think that the censorship should start at the very beginning. But failing that, then I think there should be very radical censorship and great attempts made to prevent the films getting into the wrong hands at the wrong age.
What I'm interested to know is whether you think at the moment that the advice that's given is still allowing far too much violence to be shown.
I find it very difficult to understand or what the different or various classifications mean, and if I see it's a 15, what to expect. My elder daughter is 12. Even with the 12, I don't think that all 12 are suitable.
So the worry is that they actually enjoy it.
Yes, eventually start enjoying violence and starting accepting violence as a mean of expression or how things should be dealt with.
Cahal's got Shem, who's a girl, and in a way, I think there's more of a problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, but with boys, because I know that my sons feel they have to conform to this kind of male image, and you know, certainly when I suggested there might be a certain amount of violence that they were going to see, they was like, oh yeah, great, yeah, blood, guts, you see, and whether they really enjoy it is one thing. They certainly say that they want to see that. And again, I worry that the more they see, the more immune they'll come to violence. And if they see it on the street, well, you know, it'll excite them in the way that they're excited by these videos and so on.
Children like 12, like our age and everything else, under shouldn't be seeing the bits where the knife bit went into the man's eye, because that was very dangerous. It was sort of disgusting as well.
All right, so let's imagine that you're all the British film censor. I want to go round and I want people to say the category that they think it should be without anybody changing their mind as we go round.
15.
15? Shmini?
18.
18, I think.
About 16, 17.
18.
18?
Yes. 18.
18?
18, definitely.
Have you ever killed anyone? Yeah, but they were all bad.
The violence encourages people to go out and buy guns and knives and does crimes and robberies and stuff like that. So say like if a 15-year-old went out and watched it, when they turn older or at about that age, they'd probably go out and get a gun or a knife or something.
They would pick it up, like, you know, the age of teenagers, most of them are like in competition with clothes and everything, and they'll be fighting. They might think, they're fighting in the middle of a fight, and like use the moves what Arnold Schwarzenegger's doing and break somebody's arm maybe. Some of the shots in that and the views were dangerous.
Sorry.
More people tend to buy violent videos, so more people make violent videos. So the more gory they make it, the more gory the other people have to make it to compare with this gory film that they've just made.
If violence gets really disgusting and gory, then children do start to, you know, if they see something really gory, that they're going to, you know, sort of worry about it. If, you know, the kind of child that gets nightmares. But if it's just a bit of blood and it doesn't look that real, like in this film, like when he got the scalpel thrown in his eye, there was no blood at all. Then they're not really going to worry about any nightmares.
I don't think it's the violence that gives people nightmares. I mean, like they're worried and stuff, but it's more if things are scary.
It depends how mature or immature you are, or how you get excited by that type of thing. Because I only enjoyed the parts that were funny. I didn't really like the violence parts. I found them quite boring because they didn't look very real.
It's just another action movie.
For the most part, this is a children's film, and it looks ridiculous, stuck out there with 15 films of an extremely taxing and very often genuinely hard, violent sort. But in general, this film has no animus to speak of, and it's an interesting case of violence not being a problem, in my view. Yes, that's definitely aerobics lesson number 3.
What this is as it were a transcultural product, because you've got this is a Chinese Hong Kong made film, and we know from other Hong Kong films that there's a much higher tolerance of what we consider to be actually quite specific and quite startling violence in films intended not only for children but for family audiences, as indeed we found in Hindi movies too.
There are bits in it that stand out that you need to take out. The drug, the needle in the arm thing, totally out of place as far as we would be concerned. Get rid of that. But it's the sort of thing that should sensibly, in my view, be cut, and it wouldn't be difficult to do it for PG.
What people object and get worried about is the fact, for example, in the fight scene in the village, you get a shot where suddenly somebody, in fact one of the villains that I seem to remember, first elbows somebody in the face and then elbows in the stomach, and the kind of criticism that one constantly is being assailed with is the notion, oh, well, that's what they do in the playground.
Oh, I said pretend!
Just speak more clearly.
Don't get me wrong, I will go along with classification if it keeps people happy, and I think that's all it's there to do. But it's, in fact, a nonsense, because films become more attractive the higher rating they have. Young people tend to dismiss films with lower ratings because they're kids' stuff, and they're drawn to the films with 18 certificates. That is the kind of film they want to see.
This is the only real evil left.
I saw so many violent films as a child, and to me, the horror of being detected in that cinema queue was far worse than anything I could ever imagine that I would have experienced in a film, because films are always, to me, films. They were wonderful things I would lose myself in for a couple of hours, but they were never the real thing. The real thing was always much more scary.
I want some more.
I think we can mislead people into thinking that if they were to ban horrific images from television, everything would be fine. The fact of the matter is that children in our society are traumatized almost daily by all kinds of horrible things that happen to them. They're not properly looked after, they're sexually abused, they may be physically abused, and they certainly sometimes are emotionally abused. Basically, it is parents' responsibility for protecting their children. I'm not saying that watching an unmitigated diet of horrific images is good for children. I don't think it is. But then I don't think an unmitigated diet of anything is good for children, and probably it's not good for adults either.
Personally, I see new media, whether it's computer games in the most simple sense or simply media like CD-ROM, as another consumer product. There is no gatekeeper. And so there was an attempt, if you want, to try and stop anybody seeing anything just because one child might at some stage see material. But I don't notice, a moral collapse simply because, 60% of all children have seen a teenage, i.e. 15 or upward movie. In fact, we might learn quite a lot from the fact that children can play with new technology creatively and enjoy it.
What censors seem to think is that we're in a downward spiral, surely, that things are getting worse, and that we must curb everything before, presumably, ultimately, civilization is destroyed.
I just don't think that that's what they do think. Most would agree with the position that I think would be yours as well, that attention should be focused, really, on the exposure of children to dangerous material of some sort, or material that might be morally corrupting in some way.
All right, why were you cutting films for adults, then?
Well, as I said, I think at the extreme, it is important not to confuse tolerance with moral paralysis, which is, I feel, the danger that you may be slipping into.
You are cutting, in fact, what people want to see.
Well,
why? How can this be a good thing? Why do we have to protect people? That's what we're talking about. We're talking about, you're talking about morals. I don't think morals come into it. We're talking about popular entertainment films which people enjoy. We're not talking about a corrupting influence.
You let him go! You let him go! Let go of it!
Tell that bitch to be cool.
I'm gonna kill you!
Say, bitch, be cool!
Be cool, honey.
Say, bitch, be cool! Tell that fucking bitch to chill!
Be cool, honey.
Chill that fucking bitch out!
Just chill out, honey bunny!
Chill!
Just chill out, honey bunny!
All right, now tell her it's gonna be all right.
It's gonna be all right.
Promise her!
I promise!
People like to see violent movies. They may decry them and say, isn't that awful, but they love it. It's like you sit on the top of a bus, you go past an accident, you look out the window, the traffic slows. That's our nature, that's people.
Clean the inside of the car. I'm talking fast, fast, fast. Wipe down the upholstery. Now, when it comes to upholstery, you don't need to be spick and span. You don't need to eat off it. Just give it a good once-over. What you need to take care of are the really messy parts. The pools of blood that I've collected, you gotta soak that shit up.
I wouldn't even think of censoring films like Pulp Fiction. There are many things I found repulsive.
Right, right.
But censorship is too dangerous a weapon to put in the hands of the state.
Give it to me! Give it to me! That'll fucking do for starters. I'll be back for this when it's fucking due every Monday. And you can tell that fucking shit out of an husband of yours. Either he pays, we find him, we'll cut his fucking bollocks off.
What am I gonna do now?
Then I'll come back and I'll rip it out your fucking ass.
Do you fucking understand now, dear?
Oh, just please don't.
Don't fuck about.
These people are animals. And if you don't pay, you don't get letters saying you're given 7 days or we'll slap your wrist. These people break legs. It could have been much, much more violence. And I say, well, okay, that was violent, but stand back and look at the overall picture of what it is like to live in this trap.
Right.
I mean, that is violence.
Right.
Every step of the way, it is violence. Right. Educational facilities, schools, houses, amenities, etc. And this is the trap these people live in.
Right.
And that's a terrible violence. Where the scene was weak, in my opinion, was the actual crash. He seems to go a dozen yards and bang, he's dead.
Right, right.
Now, this was simply because we didn't have the funds.
Right.
We didn't have the money. That should, I mean, imagine an American movie. It would have gone round and round, and we couldn't afford the time or the money. The money was the main consideration.
Right.
And this happened a lot throughout the film. And if you spot it, I mean, especially having written it, I knew what could have gone in. We've had the same problems with the Spanish Civil War film, Land of Freedom.
It's a huge operation, about 20,000 militia on this front alone. I'm not in the Communist Brigade, but it doesn't matter, because we're all fighting the same enemy.
I have no problem with the use of violence, depending upon what it's used for. Violence was necessary against Hitler.
Right.
To defeat Hitler, and no one would argue against that.
Right.
But it depends what the issues are involved. I think you can draw parallels for any situation where there is war and where there's a crisis of leadership and where there's a breakdown in beliefs, in philosophers, and where different contending parties are manoeuvring and manipulating, and the people at the bottom are the ones who suffer.
Freedom to express ideas, even though they are distasteful to me, that freedom is indivisible. So that I am demeaned as an adult citizen in what is at least nominally a free democracy by laws and practices which stop me experiencing things that I do not wish to experience, and stop me making things as a filmmaker that I would not wish to make.
And that would include, to take the easy example for the censor, but you'd include things like child pornography in that, would you?
There are, I believe, laws about the participation of children in these things, in these films. Are there not?
There are, indeed.
Let the laws stay and let people be prosecuted.
I think what we are talking about is essentially a small group of people, like the British Board of Film Classification, who are set up to be moral guardians for the rest of us, and that is odious and always will be.
See, it's quite clear that your main problem seems to be this fixation on the idea of a small group of people, and the idea that some people make decisions on behalf of others. But that's done in every single regulatory and decision-making agency across the country. We are always having decisions made on our behalf. It's part of the deal of living in a society with a government.
Your own foolish actions brought you here, condemned you. But then again, you were condemned at birth, born to serve the nation.
I was concerned, it's raised rather familiar conundrum for censors and classifiers, which is whether something can be terminally boring and obscene at the same time.
What is the difference between this and what is gaily and regularly seen on the big screens of this country of people like Stephen Chagall, particularly I'm thinking of, putting in the boot, breaking necks, breaking arms with satisfying crunches?
Well,
what is the distinct? Why is that not obscene? Why is this
very
obscene?
little, and very often it is, and very often I would
No, but we worry way about this. We don't seem to worry about Stephen.
Well, I think we
fact,
do. We have, in fact, cut Seagull movies.
You can tone down a movie by taking out specifics, but I think here you can't, because it's about torture and captivity and the horror of being in somebody else's power in a sadistic way.
I don't think you changed the tone of this thing by
There's also
cutting
the
it.
issue of whether it's any part of the censor's job to police family relationships, which is essentially what we're talking about. I mean, the parental responsibility.
But I just do not believe that this is a movie which was made by a director who wanted to give his audience the pleasures of torture for an hour and 29 minutes. I just don't believe it, and the reason I don't believe it is because of the way the film is put together.
Well, like most things, it's obviously the product of mixed motives.
Hello, guys.
Hello there.
I'm Ray Brady. I directed the film you've just viewed and criticised.
I think criticise is quite the right word, but never mind.
But therein lies the irony. Very few other people get the opportunity to criticise my film. This documentary would be going out on Channel 4 when they wouldn't show my film.
And the fact that we tried to get a certificate, we couldn't get a video certificate.
So why are you having trouble with it?
Why am I having trouble with it?
Well, why isn't it being screened?
Because I suppose it's because my film is considered to be, you know, something which is foul and, I don't know, it's trash, I suppose. Maybe it's considered to be that, I guess. I mean, we conceived the film
to actually challenge some of the ways that the BBFC were actually editing violence in this country. And we thought, well, really, to tell you the truth, we thought they were really getting it wrong.
Guarantees running on 10 then.
I think that if you see in reality violence happening, people will automatically be disgusted, they'll be repelled, they'll be shocked, you know, they'll back away, they'll step in, they'll try and stop it, yeah? But in cinema, the action hero is allowed to get away with it. So that's why I set out to make the film. We also try to bring up points about domestic violence, use of torture instruments. In domestic violence situations in this country, which is the majority of violence that actually happens in this country, men beating up on their wives and things, it's those kind of instruments which are used. So, I mean, I don't think actually, if you see these things as despicable and horrible and disgusting as they are, it doesn't mean that you want to emulate, you don't want to copy it. I think any healthy response, I think the majorities of people's response will be, God, look at that, isn't it revolting, isn't it disgusting, and they'll back away from it.
I mean, it's interesting for us as a group of women to look at a film like that and find out where we are. I mean, are we actually identified with the two women in there?
Well, when it first came on, I must admit, when he was in that chair and she was at the very start, I thought, wow, God, what it would be like to be that woman and be able to say and do the things that she did to that man. But that's not to say that I'm going to go out and drug some man and tie him up to my bed and torture him, but you do. So it does affect you in some ways, but only if you've got it in you anyway. I mean, we'd all like to do things, but we don't all go out and do them.
It's a nice thought to think that you could actually get revenge on a man that treated you badly, but I don't think I could actually go away and do it. I think we all fantasise about getting revenge, don't we? But I don't think I could.
He'd be inclined to reverse that role and put a woman in the chair if they saw the film.
But obviously, at some level, it's got echoes of what might have happened to some of you here. You know, so there's a way that you can put yourself, or you find yourself put.
Well, before it was only a film, you know. But then when something comes on that fetches things back to you, it's not a film anymore.
So
you know, then it's reality.
In parts, when you can relate to it, it's quite scary. But once it's finished, it's gone. And I don't think I'll hold on to anything.
We wouldn't have liked to have seen the woman strapped to the chair and the man doing all the portraying, because that wouldn't, you know, I don't think I'd have sat and watched that actually, because you know it just brought back everything that we've been through.
Some men, like if they were to see that, it might make them think twice about half the things that they do, like, you know, going out, finding other women, not using condoms, showing them proper family values, which they should have anyway. And it's these men that are the ones you've got to get through to, because they're the ones that really don't care. They just go out and do what they're going to do and don't give a damn who's in the way.
To them, it would be just a film. It would be, what a load of rubbish, you know. This just wouldn't happen. And I don't think it'd change them at all.
One of my sisters was actually killed from domestic violence, and her husband was obsessed with karate films. He had loads of karate books, and I tell her collects all the karate films you can ever think of. You know, and the actual incident that when my sister died, it was a blow to the neck, and it was one blow, and that he picks up from, you know, from the sort of rubbish he picks up.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think any man that watches that film is going to change because he's watched that film.
Yes.
He's not going to think, oh, I better not do this anymore, and because that might happen to me. He's just going to think, that's a film, that's a load of rubbish, I'm not taking notice of that, and I'll just carry on my own sweet way.
Yeah, exactly. It's not something that's strong enough that is going to let him turn his, you know,
well, they
his
just
wicked ways,
look at
really.
the bits that they want to see, like the woman in the rubber dress. They'd look at her and think, oh yeah, look at that. Wouldn't mind a bit of that. But they wouldn't. They don't. I don't know. Men don't get messages like that, I don't think, that are aimed at them.
They only hear what they want to hear and see what they want to see.
I don't see why action films are treated in a much more casual, you know, laissez-faire type attitude. It's only action, it's only entertainment, let it through. This is what I see all the time coming through the BBFC. When somebody actually tries to say something serious about violence, when they try to actually show it realistically, try to deal with the issues, these films have problems. There's a certain group of people there that are not going to allow certain arguments to be portrayed on film.
Well, I think one part of your argument is a very good and strong one, and I thoroughly agree with it, and that is that the policy, which I believe you have been a victim of simply taking what you've done and putting it away in a drawer without pronouncing or explaining what it is that lies behind the decision, good or bad in your view, is a very poor policy and is an unjust policy.
Yes, I think exactly the same is true of weapons policy. Chain sticks were habitually cut out of movies simply because they were exotic. The first time they were actually allowed through uncut on the screen in a real context was in Romper Stomper.
If you were walking down the street, I'd go like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I'm just struck you before you got within 2 feet of me.
Yeah.
I mean, if you throw that out as well,
but
that gives me a reach of what, good 4 feet? Even further if I had stretched my hand.
But you'd have to get a swing, wouldn't you, to really let that?
No, to let that.
You don't need to.
No, if you know how to use them.
Well, I think it's the point I'm trying to make. Yeah. If you know how to use them.
That's my case.
Yeah. Would you ever attribute any of this violence to violent films and videos? I mean, would you ever feel that they were responsible for what you see?
Not in particular. I don't think so.
No, it's just life as it is at the moment.
Yeah. We got a job. Some domestic fights, it'll just be somebody slapping somebody else in their family. On the other hand, you might have the case where a wife has grabbed a carving knife. Most of the time that would be drink related, I would have said.
Drink's a common cause, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. There's an awful lot of weapons on the street, that's without a doubt, because of the injuries that we see. But there's still damage done with fists, feet, even bits of wood. If people find bits of wood lying around, that's a call coming in. Knives we see a lot of, well, not the actual knife, but we see knife wounds, whether they be stab wounds, slash wounds, Stanley blades are used a lot, and you're seeing more shootings now.
But I mean, wounds are a funny thing as well, because you do something like a stab wound, you look at it in a book, and it's just this, generally it's kind of little slit.
Right,
you know,
right.
Most reference books. But if you did that on film, people would think, oh, forget that. That's stupid. It doesn't look like a stab wound. So you also have to imagine what it's like in the mind, or how you would imagine a wound, a particular wound to look, and kind of cut somewhere between that and the real. A lot of people tend to think that it's kind of all horror, and horror I tend to not do so much of. What we tend to do here is a lot of very high detailed work, and very high quality work, stuff that looks natural, real, and very good mechanics. We have very good technicians, very good sculptors, and so when we do something like a prosthetic, every pore of the skin is sculpted in, every little line is sculpted in to look absolutely natural. This is one. It's actually been used in several films. It was originally made for Frankenstein. But as you can see, medically, it's all correct. And then once, when you put it on set, you put bits of kind of goo in there and KY jelly, and whatever's needed to kind of make it shiny, and it brings out all the colours, and it looks absolutely real. But all the hair is inserted one by one.
Once was bad enough, but twice?
Didn't knock, honey.
What our specialty is here would be any hits on the face or arms, any bare skin.
Right.
And we have a method that we use.
So
for
it's a flesh wound, in other words.
Yes. And on the Crying Game, Miranda Richardson had to be shot in the neck, and then blood had to pump out.
I remember that.
He was there, wasn't he?
So when you've got someone like Miranda, a very delicate lady, I mean, you had to, and then put explosives on the neck, you have to be very careful.
The main thing is, if you've got an actor that's is paying £7 million on a film, or the film's worth 300 million or whatever they spend, you can't go and kill him. You know, so if you're going to...
That sounds reasonable.
Yes, right. So if you're going to throw something, like a brick, you obviously don't throw the brick.
Yes.
This one is...
Yeah,
even that hurts a bit.
Yeah, it does.
But if I use balsa, it's going to stop much easier than if I use a heavy piece of wood, which the momentum will carry it through. You see, I can actually come quite close to you.
Yeah, let's not get too carried away with this.
I can't hit you with... People think balsa is non-hurting, but it isn't. But again,
the verbs you're all using are hit, hurt, and so on. And I just wondered, do you think you're contributing in an important way to the culture of violence in all of this?
It's often used for comedy. I mean, you know, violence in comedy is just as, you know, in fact, it's older probably than violence. I mean, to take that's the classic sort of
At the moment, we're just making some Punch and Judy puppets, and they want a slapstick.
That is the original slapstick. I mean, do you do dead bodies and that sort of thing as well? Or
Occasionally,
is that one of your fun
programs
things?
like The Bill, we've made sort of bodies that are meant to have been in the water for a number of days. So
apparently it turns rather lardy, you know, like a piece of lard.
we were asked to make dead cats and dead dogs and dead horses and things like that, and I don't find that particularly enjoyable to do.
I mean, most of the things we do aren't. You know, they are unreal. In this. They don't break anything like this is going to break when I hit you on the head with it.
Now, under British rule, this island has always been, and always will be, a model of stability, common sense, and tranquility.
I think everybody likes to see a big, wonderful special effect in the movies. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, that was the thing that I used to look forward to, was the culmination of the big effect. So I think audiences haven't changed, and kids still like to see, you know, a big fireball, car blowing up, or, you know, huge piece of action.
Do you think kids really can distinguish between fantasy and fact?
Because they've seen so much of it now, they're much more discerning about the actual content and whether it's fun, like, for instance, True Lies, which is absolute fun, or, you know, sort of something like London's Burning, which is perhaps more educational, and they can distinguish between that.
Do you think we get a kick out of other people's catastrophes?
Anybody gets a kick out of disaster as long as it's not actually happening to them. And applied violence, spectacle, etc., 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 is dramatic to watch, and people do get a kick out of it. I mean, I get a tremendous kick out of watching other people's explosions and stuff.
So how do you train your people to cope with all this stuff?
It's not training so much. What we try and do is grade everybody on the experience that they have and they've achieved over the years of working with fellow professionals.
What I should ask you, I suppose...
Are you happy with that? That's great. All right. 4 little kids on fire there, then.
I think that is the nub of our argument, that I believe that we know the difference between right and wrong, and you, as a censor, believe that people have to be protected because they don't know the difference.
All right, Peter, in you come.
What I've said is I'm drawing the line between films which have an intelligence to them, or at least a perspective which takes account of the impulses towards evil, and those which simply run with that flow and enjoy the evil itself.
If you've sat there day after day experiencing this material, which is only banned because it's harmful, then I deeply worry about the state of the soul of these censors. And I want to say to them, don't protect me, please. I don't want it on my conscience that you should be morally depraved and corrupted on my behalf. I am an adult and I'm quite capable of looking after myself.
It has damaged me. No, I'm not saying that in any sort of brave champion of the people sort of way, but I think it's undoubtedly true that all of us have now images and ideas and experiences inside us that many or most of us would rather not have there.
Thank you.